Hey, what's up all of you beautiful subscribers? Welcome back to the Chapple Show. So what we're going to be talking about today is how to make a good real estate investment for beginners. So this is going to be a general overview of things you should look for before you buy your first property for the most part. Now, so this property could be one that you want to buy and then rent out, which is what I consider an investment. But a lot of these things that we're going to talk about apply to if you're just buying your first home or your first property and you want to live in it, and you want to know whether if you're going to buy it, if it's going to appreciate over time and then you can sell it. That's viewed as an investment by some people. Not necessarily myself, that's more of luck. But we're going to cover things like that too in this video. So let's just jump right into this here. So some things to look for, some things to think about. So one of the first things that I think about when I look at a property, and what a lot of people do, is think about will the demand for this property go up over the next 5 to 10 to 20 years. So will more people want to live here? So I'll just say demand over 5 years. Will more people want to live here over 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, and so on, however long you want to hold this house for? This is not a fix and flip, but will the demand for this house, this area, this land go up? And so this is, the answer to this in a lot of cities is usually yes. If you go to places, all the hot places, Toronto, New York, Los Angeles, Vancouver, pretty much if you buy any sort of property in any of those areas, because the population of those areas is increasing, more people want to live in the city, the value of your land, if you're buying if you're buying land and not an apartment, the value of that is going to increase most likely over time. But if you're buying a place there's an example here, Niagara Falls in Ontario, that it used to be a hotspot. It used to be a really cool place to live, but the population's been decreasing over time. Less people want to live there. Crime rates have gone up. So the value of properties has gone down because less people want to live there, despite how pretty the actual falls are. It is really pretty. So I was actually looking at, but saying that you can actually get some good deals in some of those areas too if you're just renting it out, but the value of the property will probably not increase if the population is decreasing. That is usually a rule. So that's something to look out for, is that will the demand of this property, of this area, go up over the next 5, 10, 20 years, or however long you want to hold it for. So that's one thing to think about. That's a general rule that I go into when I look at real estate. So another thing that you should look for is that if you're looking to rent out the property, this is a basic thing you should look out for, is look at comps. Comps for rent. Meaning that if you are renting out a 4-bedroom single-family home, let's just keep it really simple here. A 4-bedroom single-family home, you should look at other 4-bedroom single-family homes that are similar in your area that are being rented. You should ask some real estate agents. You can find some of them online, find some of them on Craigslist, Kijiji, wherever you are. Look at some comparable asking prices, or some comparable prices, if you can find some actual contracts, about what you can get in rent. That is something that you should do that's 101. So if this 4-bedroom place that you're renting out, maybe you think you get $2,000 for it, maybe there's a comp that you find that maybe a very similar house got $2,200 for it. Maybe you got $1,800 for it. You don't want your place to be empty. You also want to get good value. So it's good. It's really important to make sure you find the comps of similar properties in your area if you're renting out the place. All right, so let's go to the next one here. This is something that people don't think about. This one's important. You can find these stats online. Usually they're government data here, but vacancy rates. So if you are able to buy a property and you can buy it in your city that you're in, or you could buy it in a town that's 30 minutes away, a city that's 40 minutes away, it's important to look at vacancy rates for those towns and cities. Usually these are posted online. The city has more than 100,000 people. Usually that's when they have enough capital to actually fund these things. So vacancy rates are pretty much, they tell you what percentage of households are empty. That's a good way of putting it. It's a really simplified explanation of it. So for example, a vacancy rate around here where I live, it's a hot spot around here for renting. So it's usually around 1 to 2% are the houses that are left, or houses or properties that are not able to be rented out or aren't lived in. 1 to 2%. Meanwhile, but there are places not too far from here, just 2 hours from here, where the vacancy rates are 8, 10%, where it's a lot tougher to rent out. So look at vacancy rates. If it's 1 to 2%, you're going to find no trouble renting out your property. But if it's 10%, it might go empty. It might go empty. So that's something to look at. Look at some vacancy rates. Make sure that you know the demand for rental properties too in your area if you're renting it out. That's important to go over. Okay, next thing I want to talk about here is, this is very similar to comps for rent, but look at previous rent history. I won't spend too much time on this one, but this is, this specifically for commercial real estate, that's what I was involved in for a long time, is if you want to buy a property as an investment and it has been rented out before, look at those contracts if you can. Ask to look at those contracts, see how much rent they're getting. A lot of the times if they have a current tenant, you legally have to look at it. And you can just ask and they have to give it to you. But you can go back 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 years. You can go back even a little bit further if you want to, although it gets a little bit wonky there. After 10 years, the city might have changed. But it's good to look at previous rent history. So there are some properties you can look at where maybe you think you could get $2,000 in rent for your place, but maybe the previous tenant was paying $2,400. So maybe you can get more. Maybe, it's little things like that to look at. Previous rent history. Let's just move on here. That's a really basic one. One thing to look at here, which is, we're not going to get into this because this could be its own video. I've probably made a few on these actually, is cap rate. Cap rate. So it's pretty... Cap rate, yeah. Oh, I spelled that right. I was like, I haven't written on this board in a long time. So cap rate, it's pretty much your return on investment. How much money you put down versus how much money you put into a property versus how much you get back in rent per year. That'll be a whole video in itself. Honestly, cap rate, it's tough to get good cap rates. Where I was dealing in real estate, a good cap rate was 6%, a really good one. You're able to find cap rates of 8%, 10%. It's pretty much ROI. It's a really simplified explanation. That's your return on investment. So if you can get anything above 5, 6%, that's a really good cap rate. Anything above 8 is fantastic. If people say the cap rate's above 15, don't believe them. If people are selling a property saying that the cap rate is above 15% and they're selling it, there's probably something wrong with the property, or they're lying. All right, so cap rate, that's its whole video. You can look at that yourself. That's a whole different thing. I've made tons of videos on those. Let's go on to the next one here. Look at, here's a really important one actually when you're buying a property. Is the property undervalued? So, a lot of the times, you'd be surprised at the amount of people selling properties that just want to get rid of it because they need the cash to fund their other businesses, or they just want the money to, maybe they're 60, they just want to go ball out now. They want to sell their property, they don't want to collect rent anymore. And so a lot of the times people will just undercharge. Sometimes, not all the times. They'll just underprice. Now, if they have a good real estate agent, they won't do that. But find ways, a lot of the times properties will be undervalued when they're listed. Now, I would say maybe 5% of the properties that I look at are undervalued, and maybe about half of them you can add value to, which we'll get to a second here. But yeah, just keep an eye out. If there's a property that you think would be worth $400,000 compared to the comparables in its area, and it's listed for $380,000, $370,000, that might be worth looking at. And so yeah, look at the property, look at if it's undervalued. Maybe they missed some hidden value. There are always some really weird examples where, like, a house layout the house will be lived in as a single family, maybe 4 people live there, but it has a really wonky layout where maybe it could be a duplex, where you can actually turn that into 2 units, and you could actually turn the property from a $400,000 property into a $500,000 investment property by just, going through some applications, sending applications to turn it into a duplex, renovating, maybe putting 10, 20 grand of work into it. And so there's ways to find value in property. That's a really common one, is seeing if there's some unused parts of a property and seeing if you can place more value into it. So turning a single family home into a duplex, it's a little bit difficult depending on the government that you're working with, but that's a common one. All right, let's move on to the next one. So can you add value? This is a massive one, especially if you're fixing and flipping, or if you're just you just want to buy a forever home or something like that. You want to buy your own house and live in it. Can you add value to it? So fix and flippers, obviously. So there's a bunch of examples. I know a lot of people that did this. Actually, there's one good example of someone I know who, they bought a really old home from like the 1920s. Really old home. I wouldn't buy a home that old, but it was cheap. It was in the city, probably worth $200,000, $300,000. It was like falling over, and they redid the whole thing themselves. They knew how to do it. They looked, and They did some research, put in tens of thousands of dollars of capital into it, and just their blood, sweat, and tears for 6 months. And that property's probably now worth about 400 grand. They redid the whole thing, looks nice. The inside doesn't look like it's from the 1920s. They redid some of the outside, the porch and everything. Looks great. It's probably worth even more than 400 grand now. So, can you add value? This is usually the fix and flippers. Can you put in $10,000 in 4 weeks of work to make it worth an extra $30,000? That's something to look at here. Can you add value to this specific property? A lot of the times you can't, especially new properties. If a property is just got built within the last 5 years, odds are there's not too many things that they missed, or else they would have been able to make more money when they sold it, or when they built it, right? When they built it and then sold it. Anyways, let's move on to the next thing here. So let's just say multi-unit. So multi-unit meaning that can you get more than one rentable unit for one mortgage? So can you get 2 rentable units for one mortgage? So you look at things like duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes, mid-rises. If you have enough money, entire apartment complexes with 8+ units, then that's good. That's usually where you find some good value. Some good cash flow too. Usually these properties have really good cash flow. It's a really niche market, but it usually has some good cash flow for the most part here. So look for multi-unit properties. If you're renting it out, usually you get some pretty good deals. It requires more money up front a lot of the times, but you get a good cash flow. It's really rare that you have a quadplex, triplex that is losing money. It's really rare. They always make a lot of money for the most part here. All right. So another thing is to look at is the land. Look at the land. So if you're in a city, most of the time, look at New York, this is the best example, or maybe not sometimes. It depends on where you live, actually. A lot of the times if you live in a city, the land is actually worth more than the building. If you live in downtown Toronto and you have here's an example. There's really old houses, 1910s, 1920s in Toronto. They're really small, 900 square feet. They're really old, haven't been updated in decades. And they are over $1 million, all of them. The cheapest single family home in Toronto is over $1 million. And those are the really terrible, terrible properties. So look at the value of the land. And will the value of the land increase? Can you somehow have better use of that land? So if you have a really old small house on a mid-sized plot of land, maybe you can knock that, if you have enough capital, knock that house over, build up whatever, a quadplex, triplex, your own single family home. You might even double the value of the entire property by just buying the place for the land value and not the building value. So that's something to look at. Land is worth a lot these days in cities. And also too, if you buy land in a city, it's likely to appreciate. It's again, this is going back to the very first thing we mentioned. If you buy land in a hot, high demand city, it's almost always going to appreciate over time. Almost always. Let's move on to the next one here. Room rentals. So this really is for people who are investing in properties that are near universities, colleges. This is a lot of the times if you have a single family, like 4-bedroom house or townhouse, it's 3 bedrooms, 4 bedrooms. Sometimes you can actually get more money by marketing it as selling 1 room at a time. So if you post on Craigslist or Kijiji or wherever you want to post things now, you can actually, instead of posting, rent out this house for $1,800, a lot of the times you can actually post, if it's a 4-bedroom place, post $500 per room. So you can actually get $2,000 total, assuming you rent out the entire place. A lot of the time students will actually get their friends to sign on too, so you don't have to do a lot of the work, you only have to get one person in. But again, this is not suitable. A lot of houses are not suitable for even if they're near universities, aren't suitable for university students. A lot of the times people don't want to rent out to university students, understandably so, because they throw tons of parties a lot of the times. And usually wreck the place. So again, that's the thing to look at too. Make sure you, again, this is a whole different video, but make sure you know who your tenants are. Try to at least get a good assessment of who they are. Make sure you can rent out to university students, but usually getting some young professionals is fine too. Usually getting people at least making a middle-class income is really good for the most part. And don't trash the place, because that can be really, really costly if you have bad tenants. A lot of the times they don't even want to move out. A lot of the times they're just not so nice people, and they will pay you the deposit and just never pay you, and you can't kick them out for a year, and you just lose tons of money, and they think you're rich, but a lot of the times real estate investment people are not rich. Anyway, so we'll move on to the next thing here. So the work. Will the property require tons of work? This is something to look at too. When you're just walking through the building, you're inspecting it, you're looking at the property, it could be priced pretty well. You're like, hey, why isn't this place sold yet? A lot of the times you miss something. If you think that something is a really good deal, you're missing something. So there could be, a lot of the times it's just, patch of mold that you don't see. A lot of the floorboards might be a little bit messed up. You might need to replace those. Flooring's not so bad to replace for the most part. Look at some damages. Look at if there's any, things of the walls that are a little bit weird. Look at any sort of water damage. Try to find little things like that. And they might not, again, this is why you have an inspector usually going through the home and do this for you before you buy a place. But if you do it yourself, you could save yourself some time and money. So when you're walking through a property, or you're looking at it from the outside even, you can just check for little things. Is the property well maintained? Is the grass cut? Look at things like, is the porch, is there any sort of decay on the porch? If it has a porch, or are the stairs chipped off? Is the paint coming off on the house? Just little things like that are signs that they did not maintain this property well. So little things like that you look for. Because usually if you find those little things like that, they didn't maintain the property quite well, and it'll require either a lot of money or a lot of work, a lot of your time just to fix those. Now, sometimes a lot of people know how to fix them, and they could do it, and they increase the value of the home after they do it. So it's all up to you. It's all up to you. If you want to put in the work and you find a place has some water damage and you know how to somehow fix that really cheaply, then go for it, buy the place. And you could actually increase the property value by a ton by doing that. A lot of the times can't happen. All right, so let's move on to the next thing here. Only a few things left I want to talk about here. Prop managers. So it's really good to look at, if you do not want the tenant to know that you're the owner of the place, usually that's a good idea. Again, this really depends. If it's your first place, don't have too many options here. But if you're on your third or fourth property, a lot of the times you should look at, or if you're planning on building a real estate empire of some sort, look at some good property managers in the area. So I'm in an area here where really there's 4 or 5 really good property management companies in the area, and they charge fees from 5% to 10% of total rent, sometimes even a little bit less, sometimes 3%, but they don't do a lot of the little things they'd like. And so look at some property managers, because they'll save you a lot of time. That means that if the plumbing breaks down, you have someone that'll go in and at least attempt to fix it for you or solve the problem themselves. If a light is broken and the tenant doesn't want to fix it, again, it depends. If the light fixture is broken, that's a better example. If the light fixture is broken, property management company will go in, fix it within a day. You don't even know about it most of the time. You just collect the check every month. Property management takes care of pretty much everything that you can think of. So look for some good property managers in the area. See if there's any good ones. If there's not, and you do not want to manage the property yourself, maybe you don't invest in that area. But if you live in a city, odds are there are some good property managers around. Okay, this is a big one here, actually. This is, if you're living in a place, here we go. If you want to buy a place and live in it, this is big, is the environment. So you look at things like, is there a lot of construction going on? Is there a lot of noise? Are there parks? Are there a lot of parks and public spaces around? Look at things like what is the crime rate of the neighborhood around? Look at just things like that. Get to know the neighborhood. Is it a good neighborhood to be in? Usually if there's a lot of public spaces and parks, value of property goes up. There's a lot of crime, usually the value of property goes down. You probably don't want to live in an area where there's violent crime, right? No one really wants to. So look for things, and look for noise. People, here's the biggest mistake that I usually see is that people will go in and, excuse me here, my microphone's kind of coming off. People will go into a house showing, and they'll just walk around for 20 minutes and it'll be super quiet. It'll be like midday. And then at 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, maybe they're near a subway, maybe they're near a rail station or something like that after they buy the place. And it's all you hear is noise from 4 o'clock to 11. And a lot of people don't like that and don't really realize that when they buy a house. So just check for what's around you. check for certain things that maybe, and just obviously check for things like, is there a grocery store nearby? That's usually, almost always there is. Is there a good walking distance? Is there a good, can you walk to a bus stop? Usually if there's a bus stop within a 10-minute walk, the value of your property goes up a little bit, and it's easier to get tenants. So little things like that to look for. Is it close to things? Is it close to amenities and utilities? And does the property have a lot of amenities and utilities? Does it have a washer and dryer sometimes? And are they going to include that when you buy the property? There's lots of little things to look at. And so that could be its whole video, just amenities and utilities for the most part. But yeah, just check the area. Check what's around. Check to make sure that it's a good environment. If there's no public spaces, no bus stops, no transportation, usually that's a little bit outside the city. It's going to be tough to rent that place out unless it's to a family that has a car, usually. So if you're outside the city, there's no mode of bus transportation. Your odds are you're renting out to a middle class to upper middle class person with a car, usually, either a husband or wife and a kid. Usually, but it's tough to find those people. A lot of the times, people that are in their 30s that have that kid, they want to buy their own place. So again, things like that to look for. Let's just close this out here. Actually, you know what? I kind of already went over this here. It's just the inspection. You know what? I already went over that actually, so maybe we should just close this out here. But just look for things. Busted pipes, mold, floorboards, roofing. Roofing is a big one. Check it the last time the roof was replaced. That's usually a big 5 to 10, depending on the house. $3,000, $5,000, $10,000 expense that people really don't think about when they look at a house. So check when the roofing was done. Check the windows. Check the last time the windows were replaced. Windows can be a big expense too if they all need to be replaced. Yeah, I think that's going to cover it. And also just check little things too. Check the type of heating. Check if it has some houses don't have air conditioning. So just little things to look for that you should do before buying a property. But these are just some general things to look for. There's 50 more things I could include on this list. But these are some of the key ones to look for when you want to invest in a property and potentially make some money from it. So I think that's going to wrap this video up. So what do you guys think of this list? Let me know in the comments down below. I'll do some more videos like this in the near future. And thank you very much for watching. Remember to check out, I have a Joisk YouTube channel now. It's just some really random cool videos, educational videos that are not, they're more of just cool facts and stuff like that. And the channel has been doing really well. It's my fastest growing channel I've ever made. And that's channel number 5 4 or 5 that's gotten to over 1 million, or 4 or 5. I got 4 channels that got to 1 million views. And then this one's the fastest growing one I've ever had to start. It's been up a few weeks and already at 30,000 views or something, so that's cool. Go check out the Joisk channel. For now, that's going to wrap this video up. I'd like to thank you very much for watching. You're all very beautiful people, and I'll see you guys in the next video.